You hear about these massive data breaches in the news all the time, right? But have you ever stopped to wonder what really happens behind the scenes in those first few minutes and hours after a company gets hacked? Well, it's a crazy race against time, basically a digital crime scene, and a huge battle to get things back to normal. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain and explain the playbook for incident response. Let's dive in. Just imagine this for a second. You walk into work, grab your coffee, sit down at your desk, and everything is chaos. The digital world your entire company relies on, it's just broken. Customer data might be gone, your services are totally offline, and every single second of downtime is costing you a fortune. It is a full-blown digital emergency. So where do you even begin? Okay, so the very first thing you do when you're in a crisis is kind of like making a 911 call. Before you can even think about solving the problem, you have to figure out what's actually happening. This is not the time to panic. It's time to be calm, cool, and methodical. Think of the first people on the scene as like digital paramedics. Their job is to survey the damage. Are we dealing with a super targeted malware attack? Or maybe a system-wide data corruption? Or something else entirely? You see, knowing what you're up against is the absolute first step to figuring out the how and the why. And it's not always some shadowy hacker in a hoodie. The cost could be anything, really. Maybe data got corrupted because of an improper shutdown, or a virus finally did its damage. It could even be something as simple as a hard drive failing or a storage server giving up the ghost. Figuring out if the cause is malicious or just mechanical, well, that dictates the entire response that comes next. All right, so once that initial alarm is sounded, we move into phase 2, the investigation. And you should really think of it as a digital crime scene. It's time to put on the detective hat and start digging for clues. And that quote? That is the exact mindset you need. Responders have to meticulously gather all the evidence. They're combing through traffic logs to see where an attack came from. They're analyzing malicious code to see how it works. And they're trying to piece together a perfect timeline of the event. Every single bit and byte tells part of the story. Now here's where things get really, really interesting. Investigators face this huge dilemma almost right away. Do you pull the plug on the system to stop the bleeding? I mean, that contains the immediate damage, sure, but you might lose the chance to see what the malware is actually doing. Or do you keep the system running so you can monitor the attack in real time, but risk the virus spreading even further? Yeah, there is no easy answer to that one. To understand how an attacker got in, you kind of have to think like one, and that's where something called penetration testing, or pen testing, comes into play. It's basically a form of ethical hacking where you attack your own systems to find and fix security holes before the real bad guys can find them. Now, a related tool, but a little different, is vulnerability scanning. So while a pen test is this creative manual deep dive where you're actively trying to break things, a scan is an automated process. Think of it like a security guard who has a checklist of every known unlocked door and window, and they just go down the list, checking each one. It's less about mimicking an attacker and more about finding those common known weaknesses. Okay, so after all that initial chaos and the super detailed investigation, the tide finally starts to turn. We're now in the third phase, repairing the damage and kicking off the recovery process. This is where the team really starts to fight back. And the single most important tool for recovery is something that was hopefully set up long before any crisis ever hit: your backup. When your data's corrupted, or even worse, encrypted by ransomware, a clean, recent backup isn't just a nice to have, it's the only thing that can bring your entire operation back from the brink. It is, quite literally, a lifeline. So how do you make sure you have a good backup? Well, the gold standard in the industry is this simple but really powerful rule that's summed up in just 3 numbers. 3, 2, 1. The 3-2-1 rule is just a beautifully simple strategy. You want 3 total copies of your data. You store them on at least 2 different types of media. So think like an internal hard drive and a cloud service. This isn't just about having spares. It's about building resilience. If one type of hardware fails, you've got another one ready to go. And, most importantly, you keep one copy completely off-site. That insulates it from a physical disaster like a fire or a flood. It's your ultimate safety net. Right, but not all backups are created equal. A full backup, well, that copies everything, the whole shebang, but it's slow and takes up a ton of space. An incremental backup is way faster. It only copies what's changed since the last backup of any kind. And then differential is kind of a middle ground, copying everything that's changed since the last full backup. Most places use a smart combination of all three to get the best balance of speed and security. So the systems are restored, the data is back, and things are starting to feel normal again. You might think the job is over, right? Nope. In fact, one of the most critical phases is just getting started, documenting everything that happened and making sure it never, ever happens again. I love this saying, to prevent a sequel, you have to understand the original story. And that is why a detailed incident report is absolutely essential. It needs to document every step taken, every piece of evidence found, and every action performed. This report isn't just for some dusty file cabinet. It's a critical tool for legal stuff, for insurance claims, and for training your team so this never happens again. But how do you prove that your digital evidence hasn't been messed with? Well, investigators use this really clever thing called a digital hash. The easiest way to think about it is like a unique mathematical fingerprint for a file. They run the evidence through a special algorithm and it spits out this fingerprint. If even a single bit of that file gets changed, the entire fingerprint changes completely. That's how they maintain a perfect untampered chain of custody for digital evidence. Pretty cool, right? This whole post-incident process is incredibly methodical, as you can see. It starts with identifying what you need to prove, then you plan out your investigation, you conduct it, and you complete a formal report. But look at that last step. Number 5, critique the case. That's asking, what were the lessons learned? And that, right there, is arguably the most important one for the future. Because ultimately, an incident like this, as painful as it is a powerful learning opportunity. It exposes all the weaknesses, not just in your technology, but in your human processes and procedures too. Turning that crisis into actionable intelligence, that's what separates the organizations that survive a hack from those that are just destined to repeat it. So after the storm finally passes, the single most important question you have to be ready to answer is this: what did we learn? Thanks for joining this explainer.